I would be thinking about you guys. I was recovering.
Yeah, that's what I. That's
Game controls. Here, there's app library and widgets on your home screen.
Because from what I understand and from what we're talking about, like this ain't gonna be the only book in this series. Like
Yeah.
you're planning on writing more books, like following the series too, correct?
100%. Right now, my thought process, because like I said, I have this all mapped out in my head. Like, like if we had like some type of technology to show people like half the stuff in my head, I think people would just be blown away because it's so everything is like planned in advance. So there is a very methodical approach to how I'm doing this. So I have 5 books I'm thinking off the top of my head for the initial story for Jackonovan. But this is going to be the whole Jackoverse, like the whole universe of Jackonovan.
Are you making a world?
Yeah, like a whole world. Like how Harry Potter has his own universe, or like how Power is creating their own universe. That's how I want mine.
You have your old JCU, Jackonovan Cinematic Universe.
Or like MCU, like that too.
Yeah.
So I'll have 2 spinoff books that I have in mind, 2 spinoff stories. I'm thinking about those being trilogies. One is more of a book about a basketball coach that gets, kicked out of his school for a scandal, and he kind of has to refine himself and find himself again and his approach in order to be successful, and to take a team that is at an HBCU and make them a relevant program, which I think would be a really dope story and something that a lot of people don't really see, because I try to make my book as unique as it possibly can, because regardless if someone else tries to replicate the idea, I don't think they could tell the story how I tell the story, because they're not me.
Yeah.
So the other spinoff would be a book about coaching through football. So about a football coach that was supposed to be a star, but a debilitating injury stopped him from pursuing an NFL career when he was a projected first-round pick. And he's been on all these other staffs as a defensive coordinator, and he goes to this school that is a PWI, but it's like in South Carolina. He has to go against not only building a program that's never, ever, ever, ever been a good football program and make them a powerhouse, essentially off of just his name value, like starting to recruit guys based off of the fact that they remember him being a good football player. And he has to go against an AD that is racist, and he only got the job to kind of fill a quota. So dealing with all of that and trying to build this program, like first, the first book would be, him and the AD, like kind of fleshing that whole process out kind of with that. And his whole staff will also be interesting because he didn't go about the conventional way of creating a staff. His staff involves all members of his friend group. So all of his friends got jobs after college, and he hit them up and he was like, hey, do you guys want to be on my staff? So it's a pretty wacky experience, and he gets a lot of flack for that, for just hiring his friends that never played collegiate sports. They work regular jobs and they played high school football, that's it. But you'll see how their experience in the real world actually helps them as coaches when they would think that would be a hindrance. So I got that. Then I got like an idea where I want to do like a spring break book that's like based off of something that happened to me in spring break. It would be in Cabo, and like it would be, how Power, the last 5 episodes were all in different perspectives.
Now, I will tell you this. I feel like my fellow black people are going to judge me. I never watched Power. I know about it. I know Tyreek, he's from Louisville, L1C4. I know that.
When I found that out, I was like, oh, that's amazing. I was like, it's from – I was like, yeah. I made me even want to watch it more, even though I already was going to watch it. So that was dope.
I always guys show love people that's from Louisville that's doing
Yeah,
big
100%.
things. But like I never watched Power. Like I never took time. Like my friends love it. I know a little bit about it, but myself,
Telling
I
you,
ain't never
man,
watched it. So I'm sorry.
it's worth it. Like me, so it's a couple of things. As a storyteller,
Mhm.
I was a teaching assistant for several years, and then one of the classes that I was a teaching assistant for over the summer was a movie critique class. So that helped change my perspective of how I look at movies. So I'm already an analytical person, obviously because of sports. So when I watch movies, I naturally have this urge to critique them. I can't help myself. Then you add on the fact that I write books now. So I'm looking for storytelling structure and character development more than the average fan. So I look at movies and TV shows very intently. And I would say out of all the things that I watch and that I, scroll through and look through kind of because I have a pretty good knack of being able to do it on the fly fairly well. And it gets better as you see things more and more and more and more. Power easily has to be the best show that I watch. Like, if you look at the structure, how everything is set up, how the characters are developed, how they keep you on your toes as far as plot, plot twists and whatnot. And also, if you look at the motive and whatnot of how things are happening. And then when you look at, inside power and all those different, things like that, where you get to hear Courtney's piece too, which adds a level to understanding or how you view it too, because you get to hear what the creator was thinking when she was, developing the plot and creating all these characters. It's like, wow. So for me, that has to be my biggest inspiration on a storytelling level, because every single time that I watch her show, it gives me like these jitters. It's like, that has to be like one of the most exciting things for my week when I know that a new episode of The Power is going to come out, because I'm like, okay, what inspiration can I draw from this? Right? So I'm looking at it, I'm like, not only am I engrossed in the story, but I'm like, what did she do this well to make me, feel this way about how I feel? Because I feel all great content, whether you like it or not, that's not the point.
Mhm.
It's to invoke some type of emotion out of you. So me, when I'm writing this book and when I'm writing other books, even when I was writing this book, I'm like, what could I do that would invoke some type of emotion out of the audience when they read this? And some of these emotions you like, some of you won't like, but that's not the point. Some people will understand it, and I'll try my best. Like, the goal was to try my best to make them understand it through the plot line. Some of them won't understand it. Then, for example, how people didn't like Tariq with his whole situation with, Ghost and all of that. What I do like about this, second situation with Power in book 2, she's humanizing Tariq, which I also think that is important too. Because you don't have to like the villain, but just because they're a villain, that doesn't mean that they aren't people as well. So when you add that humanizing element to it, that gets people to like the villain or the anti-hero, which in this situation, Tariq is developed more from a villain to like an anti-hero in a sense, because he's the protagonist of this new series. You're like, whoa. So I think that with each book and the more that I'm watching other storytellers do their thing, it'll just advance my mind as far as my ability to tell these stories. Because a lot of authors read books in order to write, because, this old adage of, good writers read more than they write. And I'm like the opposite. Like, I write more than I read, and I watch more shows than I write. So it's just my learning style. Seeing it visually and seeing how all those elements intertwine can help me more than just reading a bunch of books, because I don't think most of these writers are going to write the way I write.
Yeah, and it's a good point you brought up about like how you said in Tariq's case how they're humanizing him even though he's the villain. And when you look at like a lot of like movies and shows from the past, like there has been some accounts where the villains have been humanized a little bit, but we started seeing a little bit more in in movies and TVs nowadays. For example, like Thanos and the Avengers
Yeah.
saga, he was very humanized. Like, you know, even though people thought he was cruel for like wanting to snap half the universe, like I feel like Marvel did a good job of explaining like his reasoning behind it, and you kind of like understood, like, you know what, you're making sense, Thanos. This kind of makes sense, especially if you know a little bit more about his backstory too. Like looking into the comics, it makes sense. Like, and then I don't know if you watch The Boys on Amazon Prime. Like, there's a character named.
Oh, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it yet.
So the character's Homelander, who's supposed to be like just this, like basically the whole show is like kind of like a parody on like superheroes, but they use superheroes as like an allegory for like a lot of societal themes that goes on with like celebrity worship, talk about like church religion, like a bunch of different stuff. It's, the government is real good. I like it. It's finished season 2, but like Homelander was supposed to be like this evil version of Superman. He's not just like a pure evil version of Superman, like just evil for no reason. Like he's a sociopath, but you like start to understand why he's a sociopath. Like it gets to the point that like this man's brutal. Like this man, he would laser beam the fuck out of anybody quickly in a heartbeat, like in a heartbeat. But you would like, it's to the point now where I understand why he is the way he is, and I somewhat feel bad for him because at the end of the day, he just wants to be loved. Like, cause he's like one of the first. I ain't gonna spoil too much here, but like he's like one of the first heroes to like being made. So he just wants to be loved, you know, because he really never got that growing up. So it's good when you see people, authors, movie filmmakers, and TV show producers who make these characters, these villains, more humanized. You know, is that something we can see in your book as well? Like, are you like humanizing people who you typically don't want to, like these villains who people really don't typically see a human side of?
Yeah, I can't give it away, but like there's a method to Brett's madness. That's all I can say. Like he's more complex than what you would think on the surface, you know, with the prototypical, you know, frat guy that has parents with a whole bunch of money, that type of deal. Like he has more layers than people will give him credit for. And I think how his version of the story or his side of the story in the book ends, that's honestly, that was probably one of my favorite parts to write, like how I told the ending to his version of it to like throughout the book. I think that's going to be cool to read.
You know, that's really good to hear. It's like that you actually had like we said, some depth to some of these characters, especially to Brett. And I kind of understand him, even though he's supposed to be this vile frat guy, but you kind of like understand him a little bit better.